Okay. Good evening, and welcome to the BiteSize Class. We'll first start off with a short vert on this week's parsha. This week is a double portion, which is Acharei Mos and Kedoshim. The parsha of Acharei Mos starts off with Vaydaber Shel Moshe Acharei Mos Shnei Bnei Aaron Mikravasim Lifnei Hashem v'Yemusa. And Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's two sons, when they drew near before Hashem, and they died. If we look at the verse repeats that they died. It starts off that this is what Moshe said after the death of the two sons. So why does the verse say this is what Moshe spoke after the death of Aaron's two sons, when they drew close to Hashem, and they died? So one of the explanations of why they died, there's a great discussion in the commentaries of why they died at all. One of the explanations from the Orach Chaim is that they died because they went close to Hashem. They drew close. In other words, it says just like from a kiss from God. In other words, they, as other places would be called Kles HaNefesh, the souls went up. They wanted to come close to God. And since they wanted to come so close to God, therefore their souls left their body. But in Chassidus it explains that this itself was considered a sin. As we read the simple verses, meaning of the verses, it seems that they died for a negative reason. And in the Chassidus explains that in truth, why did they die? What was negative about it is that it's true they wanted to come close to God, and their souls were so much yearning, had so much yearning for God, for spirituality, that the souls left them. But the truth of the matter is a person is supposed to be in this world. A person was created for a purpose in this world, to uplift the world, refine the world, draw down holiness into the world. And that's not what they did. And that's why it was something negative. Although in one hand, it's very high spiritual level that their souls left their bodies because they want to be close to God, but ultimately that wasn't fulfilling the purpose of why they were created. And based on this, we can understand the verse and why the verse repeats it. It's not really a repetition. The verse is actually explaining why they died. In other words, the verse would be read like this: Vaydaber Shel Moshe, Hashem spoke to Moshe, Acharei Mos, after the death of Shnei Bnei Aaron, after the death of the two children of Aaron, when they went close to God and they died, meaning the problem was that they went close to God and they died, and that they were ready to give up their souls, not have a purpose down here in this world, but that their souls should fly up to the heaven and so on, which the lesson to us is obviously that while we may have great spiritual highs and just want to be lost in spirituality, we have to work down here in this world and channel that high into the mundane, uplifting the physical and drawing that holiness into this world. That is the vert for this week. And getting to Tanya. So last week we explained that there's holiness, and then there's what's called the Sitra Achara, the other side. In other words, whatever is not on the side of holiness is considered the other side, not holiness. And because of that, we had to define what holiness is. Holiness was something that is a receptacle, can receive in a revealed fashion holiness, godliness. And if something has ego, so then it can't really receive and have holiness. Now, when we're discussing Sitra Achara, it's important to note that there's actually two levels. There's what's sometimes called the Shalosh Klipas Atmeis, the three Klipos, husks of impurity, three levels of impurity. And then there is also what's called Klipas Noiga, so in order of severity, there's the Klipas Noiga is sort of something that's not entirely bad. So we have Shalosh Klipas Atmeis, which is forbidden objects, which is anything that is forbidden to eat, non-kosher food, or even foods that, let's say, arla, let's say from a tree, the first 3 years that it grows, and so on. Anything that is forbidden to, the item is forbidden, or a physical act, that's all comes from the shalosh klippos hatmeis. Then there's klippos noiga. Klippos noiga, which is really translated as the klippa is like a shell or a husk. And noiga means that shines, which is actually a positive connotation. Because in klippos noiga, unlike the 3 klippos hatmeis, the 3 levels of impurity, it's something that has both good and bad. Or another way of putting it is klippos noiga is anything that is sort of neutral. There are things, there are items that are not prohibited. They're not necessarily used for a mitzvah, but they're not prohibited. They're not a transgression either. Any food that's kosher to eat, or when we go about our day-to-day life, that's klippos noiga. That's, in a certain sense, it's neutral. But as we said, there's not really neutrality. There's holiness and there's anything on the other side. But it's neutral in the sense that it depends on what we make of it. If we use it for something positive, so then we uplift it. If we use it for something negative, so then it's in shalosh klippos hatmeis. If you use it for a positive purpose. And it's a mixture of good and bad. For example, you have the food, you have the great taste of the food, and how you have a great desire for the food, and so on. And then there's the fact that you could use the food, the energy that you get from the food. So, right, so there's a good aspect of it and a negative aspect to it as well. The truth is, however, that both shalosh klippos hatmeis as well as klippos noiga, both of them, both what we're calling quote unquote neutral and what we're calling the 3 levels of impurity, both of them have sparks of holiness in them. But there's a difference. And shalosh klippos hatmeis, the sparks of holiness are covered and submerged to the extent that they're not revealed, and we can't really, in a normal fashion and under ordinary circumstances, we can't elevate it and we can't reveal these sparks. There are exceptions, but that's not for now. When it comes to klippos noiga, on the other hand, we are able to elevate it. If you use it for something positive, so then it's elevated. And the reason why we must say there's sparks of holiness, because even something that's impure, shalosh klippos hatmeis, has to have some holiness that's giving it substance, that's making it exist. And it is based on this that we can actually understand why something prohibited is called asur, and something that's permitted is called mutar. The word asur can also come from the word that it's asur, matar asurim. We in other words, something that is tied. Mutar would come from the word untied, and asur, it's tied. Something that's asur, something that's prohibited, is tied to the shalosh klippos hatmeis. It's tied to the impurities that we cannot uplift it in a normal fashion, as opposed to klippos noiga, which is not tied to it. And even if we use something that's neutral, not for something positive, we didn't do anything, we didn't transgress, we didn't do anything prohibited, but we didn't use it for something positive. So it is true that we have not uplifted it yet. But we can still uplift it later on, because it's still untied. It's still not chained to the impurities. It's just hasn't been uplifted, but it's not tied to anything. And with just a little effort, we can later use the effort to uplift it, which is an important lesson for us to know. That even if we didn't, you take the opportunity now, there's always an opportunity to further on down the road. For example, we enjoyed something, we ate something because we enjoyed it, not because we wanted to use the energy for further learning or doing a mitzvah. But nevertheless, if we later decide, you know what, let's use it for something positive, or I'm inspired, I'm in a good mood now, so I'm going to do something positive. So then you are, in the end of the day, uplifting that item to holiness. Moving on to a short halacha. When this this actually comes up many times when people are traveling or you're visiting. So sometimes you may be in a, let's say, in a hotel or a lounge, and they only have, there's no disposable cups. There's glass cups. Now, the glass cups are not kosher. They were probably cleaned in non-kosher places that may be used for non-kosher drinks, whatever it is. So they may not be kosher. But we can, since if you use the glass cup for only a cold beverage, so we know that there's a general rule for something to get in part not kosher taste, it has to be hot. There has to be some heat there. So if it's not hot, if it's a cold drink, so then there's no heat to transfer the non-kosherness of the glass into the drink. So we're putting aside coffee and tea, which are hot beverages. That's something that you shouldn't use. But if something, a cold drink, a glass of water or a Coke or whatever it is that you're drinking, that you can drink in the glass beverage. Now, it should be noted that this only applies to if you're like in a let's say a hotel or something like that. In a person's own home, we normally don't say that you could use a prohibited item in a permitted way. In other words, if you have a non-kosher pot or whatever it is, we don't say, okay, you can use it for cold because in the first instance, because it's not imparting taste and there's no heat here, because we're scared that you may use it. If we say if you are allowed to use it in a permitted fashion, you may come to use it in a prohibited fashion. However, this restriction would not apply to a place where it's not your item and you're not using it in Jews aren't there and you're not going to come to use it in any other way. It's a one-time thing. So then you would be allowed to use a cold a glass, a non-kosher glass for a cold, not hot beverage, not in your house, but not on a permanent basis. You would be allowed to use it. It should be noted that if there's putting in lemons or anything sharp in there, it's a separate story. But just straight out, a cold drink in a non-kosher glass may be used. So just to recap, we started off with why the parsha starts acher vidaber. Why does it start acheri mois shnei bnei Aaron b'kravas l'fnei Hashem v'Musa? Why does it say that Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of the two children of Aaron, when they got close to Hashem and they died? Why the double language? So we explained that it's actually not a double language. The second Vayamusa that they died is actually explanation of why they died. They died because they came near before God in a fashion of death that they were ready to leave their souls, their bodies in this world, and their souls would fly up to heaven, that they would die without focusing on their purpose on this world, which is to uplift and refine the world, work within the world, not to escape the world in spirituality, but focus within the world down here. And we explained in Chassidus that there is, even though we say anything not holiness is called the other side, but in the truth, there's two general levels. There's what's called shalish klipas atmeis, the three husks of impurity, 3 levels of impurity, which includes anything that's prohibited or doing an action that's prohibited. And then there's klipas nega, which is called the right klipa. In other words, the klipa that shines, because there is holiness can shine through there. It doesn't obstruct completely the holiness, and it's sort of a neutral. Anything that is neutral, if it can be used for holiness, and it's not tied to impurities, to things that are not permitted. And therefore, something that's not permitted and is tied to shalish klipas atmeis is called asur. It's tied, as opposed to anything else. It's mutter. It's untied. Therefore, even if you didn't actually use it out now for something positive, that energy, that spark, it's not tied to impurities, and it can be uplifted later on. And then we said the short halacha that you can use if you're not in your own private setting in a permanent basis, but you can use glass, non-kosher glass, even for a cold drink, since it doesn't have any heat to impart the non-kosherness into the drink. Thank you, and have a good night.